2, 1, action.
Hello, I've been asked to do a micro-teaching session on political and social factors affecting business startups in the UK. Before we begin, I just want to make a few sort of observations about how I would do this in a lesson. What I'm assuming is that this is a level 3 BTEC group. They've got some knowledge of business studies and business studies technical terms affecting this. But it's basically an introductory thing, so I'll begin from there. Okay. Right, I think we need a bit of context before we actually get underway at talking about the political and the social factors affecting business startups. This comes under a section called SLEPT analysis, so I'll put that on the board. SLEPT. Those letters stand for, it's basically an acronym, social, legal, economic, political and technical. There are other variations. There's something called PESTLE, there's STEEPLE, but effectively it's the same thing. And if you, in all of these there are two common ones, social and political. Okay, we're now talking about, we're in June 2014 and obviously I'm going to be talking about the UK. Okay. We're going to start up a business. What is that business likely to be? It's going to be statistically either a sole trader or a partnership. When businesses set up in the UK, something like 96% of them are this type. They're small, okay? And they are going to be affected by a number of factors. The first thing is these businesses, some of these things they can influence themselves. For example, they're obviously going to influence the sort of things that they make or the sort of services that they offer. They can control that. They can control how many people work in their firm. It's their decision. But there's a whole group of things which we call macroeconomic factors that they cannot affect. And these two things, political and social, fall within that. They would like to influence them, but they can't. Good example from not talking about social political, if I was an importer of cotton to make shirts, I would not be able to influence the price that I buy my cotton at from overseas because of the interest rates. I would like to, but I can't. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to take them in this order. I'm going to talk about political influences first of all. Okay. Now there's an old joke. Don't bother to vote because the government always gets in. Now, although we might find it a bit funny, I think we'll all realise that politicians have got a lot of power because what they decide at both a national and a local level certainly will infiltrate into another part of the SLEPT analysis, legal. Now, basically, it's what politicians think and their attitudes towards business. Now, today, I think all political parties are very pro-business. And you think, well, why is that? Well, it's fairly obvious, because every 5 years somebody is going to go down to the ballot box and put a little X in a piece of paper to say, I want these guys in power. And of course, what makes people happy, of course, is people with jobs and people with money in their pocket. So, what's the sort of influences on this? Well, we can talk it at a national level, or we could talk about it at a local level. Of course, if I had a lot more time, what I would do is I would break off and maybe we could discuss this in a group. But I think if I actually posed the question, what sort of factors would a new business be concerned about when it was setting up? And it would be things, I suppose, like where I'm going to get my capital to invest, where am I going to get my workers from, where am I going to be located, etc. Now these have political overtones. Let's just take the one about investment, capital. A lot of small businesses will go to their local bank and say, look, I've invested some of my money, what about you investing in my business idea? Now, of course, the bank is under business arrangements itself, it's not going to lend to anybody. But one of the problems that business has been facing recently is that banks aren't lending. Now, the government, through its political influence, is not happy about that. So what can it do about it? Well, it can't force banks to lend, But we are basically in a very happy, well, the government is a very happy situation in that it's got stakes in at least a couple of banks, because it bailed them out a couple of years ago when the economy was bad and recession was hitting us. So what they can do is they can turn around to banks and say, look, I think you should be lending to business, and that obviously is a positive business environment. Small business startups will like this because something's being done in their favour. Next political thing, what about location? Well, that's more of a local thing. Your local your local council will try to influence where people set up, and things like planning permission. What's the political pressure here? To relax these things so that people can set up with fewer rules and regulations. Another big one, of course, is people try and get money. Yeah, is it possible? Yes, the government loves all this, both at a national and local level, and there are all sort of grants, and there's also sort of help that's available to small businesses when they set up. And the pressure, the influence, the sentiment, if you like, from a political perspective, is more of this place, because they know ultimately if your small business startup is successful, in time you will take on extra workers, which means more tax for the government. It means obviously more people are employed and less being paid out for social welfare payments. It also means more tax for the government in the form of taxing profits as the thing gets more successful. Yeah. So there's just one good example of political and the political influence under the SNEP analysis. Now the next one I'm going to talk about is social. This one's a little bit, social is a bigger thing. People can access this more. This really is divided, I'm going to divide it into two parts. Okay? Demography. Demography, what does it mean? It basically means the population in the United Kingdom, what we're like, yeah? Now obviously this changes probably slowly over time, yeah? How is our population made up? Well, what are the big influences on business because of these social factors about our population? Well, I'll give you one good example, okay? We have, in the United Kingdom, an ageing population. What does this mean? Does it mean that we're all getting older? Well, of course we are. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that a greater percentage of our population are now over the age of 65. Rather than go through all the reasons about that would be a lesson in its own right almost. Let's just accept that as a fact. If I was a business, what would I want to be doing? I'm looking to myself and saying, obviously I want to make a profit. Where are the groups in society that are expanding? The old people, ageing population, and that will then influence the sort of things that businesses might do. I'll give you a good example. Holidays, okay? If we know that, if I was setting up in the holiday industry, what I'd be thinking to myself is, I know there's a lot more old people out there. I want to set up a business which at least in part, or maybe more than in part, I'm going to aim at the older person. I'm going to do the things that, I'm going to offer the sort of things that they would like. Cruises, going out, 3-day little sort of weekend away, painting on Scottish Highlands. Not the type of sort of thing that the average 17-year-old would be interested in, I'm sure. But look, you can't, if you're a business, you are looking for your USP, your unique selling point, and your unique selling point might be selling to these older people. Okay. Now the second sort of social influence is basically how we live our lives. Again, I come to the fact that no one can control this. Businesses can't control this. They have to adapt to it. If they don't adapt, they're going to lose profits and maybe ultimately their business startup will fail. I'll give you a very good example about this, about how things change over time. Tattoos. If you look at me, I've got no tattoos. But I'm sure if you look at the average 7 to 20-year-old, you'll find that at least some of you have got tattoos. Why? Well, because it's fashionable. What was the attitude 50 years ago? Why haven't I got tattoos? Because I was brought up in an age whereby tattoos were sort of seen as a little bit, people who wore tattoos, you didn't do it. That's the sort of thing, but things have changed now. And if you have a skill, and you're, say, a graphic artist, or you might think, I'm going to set up a business. I want to become a tattoo artist. Why? Because it's fashionable. Now you might say, well, what's going to happen to this? There may come a time you might be sat there thinking, oh, I'm great, my tattoos are going to stay with me forever. Well, they will, but you might find in 25 years, 30 years time, there's a bit of a backlash against this. It's old-fashioned. Yeah? And you might find that people say, well, I want to get rid of my tattoos. So what you might then find is that other things start happening whereby people who were tattoo artists are now involved in taking them off. I mean, it does happen today. Now that's just one small example of how social influences influence business. Some of these things are immediate, some of them are longer term. Yes, so demography is about the population, and if I can put there social trends. Okay? Some of these social trends take a long time to alter, just like the tattoos I was saying. Some are almost very much shorter. Another example I've got is smoking. I think we can all agree that smoking today is much less acceptable than perhaps it was 20, 30 years ago. And now the government and all sorts of people are basically trying to restrict smokers where they smoke and etc. That actually is linked again in with the legal influence. But how has business reacted to this? Because there are people that still smoke out there. What businesses say, well, okay, my business is suffering, but what about, is there any way I can get around this? Well, think about e-cigarettes. You've got businesses out there who are looking and saying, well, hang on, what's my USP? A lot of people want to give up smoking, and e-cigarettes will do that. There are some people who want to carry on smoking, but they're thinking of trying perhaps get a way around smoke, the cigarette ban, as it were. But here's another good example of somebody's USP. They're trying to think of a profitable idea. If it works, and obviously they are going to be able to expand their business from their small business startup. But coming back to what I was saying before, it's all to do with the trends. It's to do with the trends. If everybody wanted to give up smoking today, then the e-cigarettes will probably have a very, very short product life cycle. It probably won't work like that. But we can see, summing up, that select analysis is to do with macroeconomic factors, things which businesses cannot influence. They have to adapt. And this is the climate, what is happening, the political climate for their business. Politicians are very positive. They're trying to help businesses to set up and to succeed. This one is a bit more difficult for businesses. Social, what's happening within our population, changes in our population. Also, how we live our lives, what are the social trends. And that is what firms have to adapt to in order for them to make profits and succeed. Thank you very much.